you run an online business that's focused on education, which is to say that you're selling information for the most part, then it's my belief that you should be running at least 30% net margins within your business. And in this video, I'm going to explain exactly why I think that. There are 5 considerations that I'm going to cover. Firstly, the natural margins for an online business. We've got resilience, the ability to scale, valuation, and owner comp. And if you get this right, it's not just a question of the health of the business or your well-being as an entrepreneur, but also your ability to maximize a future sale price, were that something that you wanted to go for. So margins really, really matter. In case you don't know me, my name is Olly Richards. I'm the founder of StoryLearning.com, a multi-million-dollar online education business. I'm also a mentor and advisor to other online education entrepreneurs. So first of all, where does the natural profit margin for an online business lie? Well, across different industries and business models, there are huge differences in profit margins. If you think of the restaurant industry, for example, it's normal for most of revenue to be taken up by overheads, fixed costs, staff, ingredients, things like that, leaving you with maybe only 10% margin at the end of the day. If you take the opposite example, let's say you have a successful solopreneur on the internet who has a big social media following, sells digital courses, it's not uncommon for someone like that to have only 5-10% of their overall revenue taken up with expenditure, leaving them 90 to 95% net profit margin at the end of the day. That's an extreme example, but most online businesses, in my experience, that do well are running at least 30% margins, and we're going to come on to see why that is the case. If your margins are less than 30%, that's not wrong. It's not to say that you can't be successful doing that, but it typically means that you aren't taking advantage of the various benefits that are afforded to you by virtue of doing business on the internet, namely very low fixed costs, distribution costs, things like that. What happens if you've got less than 30% margins? Typically, you've acquired a lot of bloat over the years, and it just unnecessarily lowers your take home at the end of the day. What margin gives you, when all is said and done, is resilience within the business. And often when people go out of business, it's just because they can't stay afloat because they don't have the cash. And it's margins that give you that cash. The ability to have 6-12 months of cash, like Microsoft keeps in their business, for example, is only possible if you have enough margin to begin with. So if you want to build cash reserves, it's very difficult to do that on a 10% margin. But at 30% margins, you can build all the cash reserves that you need. It also gives you the ability to invest into R&D. One of the things that you always want to keep doing as time goes on within a business is to be predicting what's coming next and experimenting with new ideas, things that allow the business to adapt into the future. And you need budget for that. If you're running 10% margins, haven't even got enough money to take home, let alone invest into R&D. And so 30% margins allow you to do that. Having good margins also just gives you, the technical term, wiggle room, which means when times are tough and things go wrong, which inevitably they do, think 2020, COVID, for example, you've just got the ability to make changes, to move things around without sinking the ship. You've probably already got cash reserves in that scenario, but with good margin, you've also got the flexibility to cut back on expenditure, to change things around without completely tanking the business. So for all of these reasons, margins just give you the ability to stay in business longer, whether that's holding cash, preparing for the future, or just getting out of a pinch. And so if you are running 10% margins, one of the things that I always try to make people think about is, like, have you done your risk analysis? Like, what happens, like, for example, if you're buying a house and interest rates change, can you keep up your repayments? It's the same kind of concept. So essentially, I think of running low margins as eating at McDonald's compared to 30% margins being eating at Whole Foods. It's just going to lead to a better quality of life in the end. So they were talking about survival, but what about growth? Well, at some point, if you're growing your business, you're going to want to scale, or at least flirt with the idea of scaling. And when you scale a business, a few things inevitably happen. First of all, you're going to spend a lot of cash, which means you need to have that cash available to spend. You're also going to increase your overheads. You probably have to bring on a lot of staff, consultants, contractors, which increases your cost base, but you also don't know how long it's going to take to figure out scale. So you've got to be able to carry that cost base for potentially a sustained period of time. So if you want to have any hope of being able to scale your business, you've got to have the margins there to be able to afford to do that. And if you're running tight margins, it just doesn't give you the flexibility to experiment with stuff, invest into stuff, and just ramp up what you're doing. You're kind of in a place where you're reliant on very specific things working and nothing going wrong. So margins give you the ability to scale. But that's not all, because margins also have a huge impact on the valuation of your business, which means if you ever come to sell, the margins that you run will have a direct impact on the sale price of that business. And I'm amazed how many people don't understand this. It's understandable, really, because often we get into business without having any of the fundamentals. We learn stuff as we go along, and things like valuation and M&A are things that you typically learn much later on in the process. But to illustrate this, let's compare two businesses both doing $1 million in revenue, but business one has 10% margins, whereas business two has 30% margins. What does that mean? It means your EBITDA, or net profit basically, is for business one is 100K at the end of the year. Business two is 300K. So these two businesses have got the exact same revenue, but quite different levels of profit as a consequence of the different margins that they run. Now, what impact does this have? When you value an online business, typically you are looking at multiples of EBITDA or net profit. And for an online education business, typically you're looking at the range of 3 to 4x of your net profit or your EBITDA. So let's assume, for the sake of this example, that it's 4x. Well, business one on a profit of 100K is going to have a valuation of 400K. But business two on a profit of 300K is going to have a valuation of 1.2 million. It's a huge difference on the same level of revenue. And if that doesn't make you open your eyes, nothing will. The exact same revenue, different margins, a huge difference in valuation. So having a target for your margin and understanding how that will impact on valuation is really a business fundamental that everyone needs to understand. And lastly, this gets us to owner comp, or owner compensation, basically how much money you get to take home. Now, I think every entrepreneur thinks about selling. They have this fantasy, usually fueled by stories in the media about people exiting for huge numbers. But the reality is that you probably will not sell your business. Statistically, the vast majority of businesses never sell. Even those who do list for sale, 60-70% of them do not sell. And this is important to understand, because this means that if you're not going to have an exit event, then where do your earnings come from? How do you build wealth or security or retirement fund as an entrepreneur? Is it just the salary that you're taking, or do you need to take extra? Most entrepreneurs take a fairly modest salary and then rely on dividends for any profit that may come, or in many cases kind of rely on some hypothetical future sale event in order to actually make their money. But given all of this, it becomes quite important that you're able to actually take some money off the table yourself, beyond your salary. If your salary covers your living costs, your lifestyle expenses, then you need to be able to save something extra on top of that. But it's the margin that will allow you to do that. I know plenty of online businesses, for example, who on the face of it are quite successful, doing low 7 figures in annual revenue, but their profit margins are 10-15%, and they're in a partnership, which means they may only be able to take out at the end of the year 5, 7.5, maximum 10% from the business. And so those numbers are fairly low despite the overall revenue numbers. Within that, the easiest lever to pull is your margins. If you can just do everything more efficiently, then not only will your business be more resilient, but you'll end up with more profit at the end of the year, which ultimately is going to impact on your ability to carry on with the business, keep it up, keep it going for years. So right from the beginning, the margins allow you to actually stay in business longer, both business and personally, which is going to maximize your chances of success. So margins matter. And I hope that's come through from the various examples I've given here. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to hear more from me, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video. That just tells YouTube that you like this kind of thing, so you'll get more. You might also like to sign up to my newsletter at ollyrichards.co, where I send out newsletters all about strategies for scaling online education businesses. And if you do that, you'll also get a free copy of my case study. It's 117 pages where I break down exactly how my business Story Learning works in exhaustive detail, from everything from marketing to strategy to team to lifestyle, the diversification, all of those things. So sign up there, and once you've done that, you might like to check out this video over here, which YouTube is pretty certain you're really going to like.